Welcome to SoberSmash. SoberSmash. Get to the core issues with King Scott and Dr. Joe and get SoberSmashed.
Welcome to SoberSmash Live. Today's special guest is attorney Mark Astor. And now the host with the most, it's King Scott.
Hey, Jonesy. How you doing, buddy?
Oh, Scott, man, I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
Fantastic, Mozo. I'm doing great, brother.
Just coming out of a Father's Day weekend. I hope you had a good time with the kids.
I had a great weekend. They made me feel like the king.
It's the way you should always be feeling, man.
I always feel like King Scott.
There you go.
It's always good. It's always good. Glad to be back here, seeing our great crew in action.
Yes.
And the great job they all do.
All gathered in the studio one more time to bring you another episode of SoberSmash. A lot going on out there.
You're not
What
kidding.
about that news we heard about today?
Oh,
Carrie Fisher.
Carrie Fisher. Unbelievable. What they found in that girl system, huh?
Cocaine, ecstasy, opiates, traces of heroin, and then some prescription drugs as well. Now, I'm not saying it was a direct
That was just
cause.
a Saturday afternoon.
That was
Hello. Hello.
Yeah. Are you sure they didn't mix that up with
I don't know.
somebody else?
Yeah, probably don't want to go there.
No, I don't want to mix
Probably
it.
don't want to go
I don't want to
But
go there.
it is a real tragedy when you think about it. You know, I don't know if that was the cause of death, but it's a lot going on there.
But we know she struggled for years.
She did.
And there's a lot of people out there. We're losing constantly. You're always hearing stories about celebrity deaths and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And here are people for let's put it out there. For people out there who think that addiction and stuff just kind of kills the people who are down and out. These people had everything and it still got them.
That's right. There's no prejudice when it comes to the disease, and everyone is still affected.
Yeah.
Even somebody like Carrie Fisher, she had family.
Yeah, absolutely. She had a sister and mother who loved her to death.
Of
Her
course.
mother actually passed away, I think, 10 days later or a week later?
Exactly. So, everyone is affected. It's not just, your next door neighbor. Everyone's affected. It hits everyone. No one's different.
Well, that'll actually be good because we're going to talk to somebody today who's going to talk about some things you could do to help people.
Sure. And a lot of people always wonder, what do I do? How do I get my loved one help? I don't have the resources to do it. What do I do? They're out of control. Is there someone that can help me, get them the help that they deserve? And I think our guest today might shed some light onto that and help us out with that. Let's bring him in there, JJ.
All right, so we're going to be joined by attorney Mark Astor. Mark Astor, he works right out of Boca Raton, Florida, down here, and he's been a specialist with working with people with alcohol and drug problems.
He has. It seems like he's the guy to call if you have an issue. He's the guy you want to represent you for any type of drug use, it looks like, or DUI. Seems to have a lot of experience in that field.
Right. And we're going to talk to him. We'll get some questions and remind people if you're on Facebook.
Absolutely.
If you're on Facebook, make sure you type in your questions. We'll
Sure.
get them out there. Yeah, have a seat.
How you doing, Mark? Good to meet you. Pleasure.
There you go. Have a seat.
Put on some headphones. We can hear you. You can hear us.
I'm going to roll my hair, is it?
Nah, look at my hair. Stays like this all the time.
There we go. Little
There
headphone
you go.
malfunction. There we go. How are you this morning?
I am good. Thank you for having me on the show.
Great. Awesome. It's good to have you here. We're just reading up a little literature about you, and seems like you're really into it. What you're doing, with the Marchman Act and, what's going on in Palm Beach County and South Florida in general. There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on nationwide with this issue, but we're very, lucky and even blessed here in Palm Beach County that we're really, taking a serious look at what we're doing with people who are having this issue.
Sure.
That's kind of a mixed blessing because there is such a problem. You can't ignore it anymore. In some areas, they may not be affected quite as much as we are down here in South Florida. But
some
you
areas,
see a lot of this,
Jonesy, I travel a lot during the week, and I can go into Detroit, anywhere in Michigan. They're going to tell me they're the worst hit state in the country. I go over to Ohio, they're telling me they're the worst place. I go up to Manhattan, and they're telling me in New York City, no one has it as bad as us. So it's everywhere.
It is everywhere.
Everyone's affected. It's not just the person next door. There's no prejudice when it comes to this. Everyone's affected.
I mean, it's a disease. I mean, if you look at cancer or any other type of disease, I don't think it discriminates. So
No.
it's the same with addiction.
None whatsoever. And how did you get involved in this, Mark? What brought you to this, line of practice where you wanted to be specialized in what's going on here?
So I started off my legal career in 1994. Actually, between 94 and 99, I worked for the state attorney's office. I was a prosecutor right here in Palm Beach County for the old state attorney, Barry Krischer. And I will tell you, I loved every minute of being a prosecutor. I got a little burned out. And that's what caused me to leave. But I will tell you that even though it wasn't a well-paid job, I went home every night very satisfied with what I did. And I left the office. I would say I did defense work on and off for many years. I will tell you that for many years, I was not happy being a lawyer. In fact, I didn't enjoy practicing law at all. I took a couple of years off from practice. I think I went on my own journey. I got married, got divorced. That was emotionally a devastating experience for me. I was living in California until about 2.5 years ago. My father had gotten sick, so I came back to Florida and got an opportunity to work for a company that taught lawyers how to run their practice like a business. And what they really were was a personal growth company. And so their philosophy was that, financial growth must be preceded by personal growth. And I'd never really been exposed to anything like that before, and so it was like somebody took the blinkers off, and I was finally starting to see the world as perhaps it's supposed to be seen.
Sure.
And one day, after about a year there, I sat down with the founder of the company. He said, I can see you're not happy. What's the matter? And I said, well, I think it's time to go open up my own practice. And he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I was a prosecutor for many years, and I've done defense work on and off. I think I'll probably just do criminal work because, that's what I know and love. And he said, well, yeah, it's okay. He said, but there's a lot of criminal lawyers out there. Is there anything else that, really, might get you motivated to get out of bed?
Tickles your fancy, as they say.
Tickles my fancy.
That's
and I
it.
said, well, I know this sounds really weird. I said, but I've noticed throughout my life, I seem to be surrounded by people who are in recovery.
Right.
And he said, well, why don't you build your business around helping those people? And I said, I can do that. He said, I don't know. You're a lawyer. Go figure it out. So I went online. I did a little research, and it turns out we've got this really cool statute here in Florida called the Marchman Act. And there's only a couple other lawyers out there really doing anything with it. And I said, spent 23 years working in the criminal justice system. 80% of people, at least, in the system have addiction issues. I think I can do a better job with this. And I think my experience in the courtroom and in the system is going to enable me to help a lot of people. And so that's what I've been doing. And that's how I'm building my business, helping one client at a time.
Now, what's the difference between a Marchman Act and a Baker Act for people that are listening right now? And listen, if anybody has any questions for Mark, please write in here on Facebook, and we'll see if Mark can get to your question.
So the main difference is everybody seems to have heard of the Baker Act, which is basically a 72-hour hold for somebody who's having some type of mental health issue, and it's typically executed by the police getting called to the scene, or perhaps a licensed practitioner calling law enforcement to come and take a patient to a local facility. The Marchman Act is focused on helping people who are dealing with addiction issues, and it also has a provision for what they call a co-occurring mental health. So, as you guys probably know better than I do, most people who have an addiction issue also have a mental health issue, and sometimes it's a chicken and egg scenario, but most of the time both are present. So the Marchman Act, as of last July, now takes into account the fact that there is going to be an addiction issue and a co-occurring mental health issue. So Marchman Act is really substance abuse focused. Baker Act is mental health. The other big difference is that the Baker Act only allows for a 72-hour hold. That's it. The Marchman Act, which is really a two-step process, the first part being assessment, stabilization, and detox, allows for a 5-day hold if it's filed with a petition, meaning somebody goes to court and asks the judge for it. So that allows for a 5-day hold, and during that period there's going to be an assessment, and based on the assessment, the court can then order up to 90 days of treatment, which can get repeated, I think it's 2 other times. So it's got significantly more teeth than the Baker Act.
Wow, so there's actually a large difference.
Yes.
Baker Act, from my understanding, is somebody that's actually going to harm themselves, where a Marchman Act really deals with the individual's substance abuse problem.
It does, but one of the things the Marchman Act also takes into consideration is whether or not the person is potentially a threat to themselves or somebody else.
Right.
So with the Baker Act, what typically happens is that either a practitioner or law enforcement are present at a scene, and someone says, I'm going to kill myself. Okay, now they initiate a Baker Act, and that's typically how it gets done. Whereas the Marchman Act, right now is not really being initiated by law enforcement or a licensed practitioner, although the provisions are there. So,
well, I'm also I'm looking at this, and if somebody is deemed as being incapable of making rational decisions, that's when the Marchman Act can come into play too.
right. So, typically when I sit down with a family, one of the hardest things for them to sort of wrap their head around is the fact that their loved one, and it's typically a child, and when I say a child, I mean a teenager or a young adult. They're like, we don't understand why won't he stop using? Why won't she stop using? Well, they've got this disease, and right now, Hyde's running the show and Jekyll's nowhere to be seen. So they're not capable of making that rational decision. If they were, they wouldn't be using it in the first place.
That's
so
right.
they're not thinking.
We wouldn't be speaking right now.
They're
Right.
not capable of making a rational decision, which is why you, who are capable of making a rational decision, have to make that decision for them.
Now, am I right in assuming that families can institute a Marchman Act? It doesn't have to be a professional to institute it?
Correct. It can be. The statute basically allows for somebody with personal knowledge of the person to initiate a Marchman Act. So one friend could initiate a Marchman Act, could file a petition.
One person can do it.
Yeah, if they've got direct knowledge, meaning not what they've heard from somebody else, but what they've seen.
And what's considered direct knowledge?
I've seen them using. I've seen them high. They've told me they use. I've seen them with pills. I've seen them, I've seen scales or weed or paraphernalia in their room. That's personal knowledge. What I've seen, with my own eyes, what I've heard with my own ears. Somebody telling me, not a third party, but that person who's on the other end of the Marchman Act.
Right.
Wow. So let's walk through this, just because, again, we jumped right in with Baker Act and Marchman Act and everything else. What does this mean to a family if you have a child or parent who is out of control and you really want to do something about it? What is the process you have to go through as a person who maybe has never done anything like this before?
Sure. Mrs. Smith in Orlando
Right.
calls us. Susie's been shooting up heroin last week. She's out of control. She locked herself in her room. I don't know what to do with her. Who do I call? What do I do? And I know there's a website out there for Marchman Act. I see those. And how do people do something at that point? Because they're in a panic mode.
They are. It's like, in case of emergency, break glass. That's when they call me, right?
Right.
Not when things are.
So what happens at that point?
Okay,
when
so
Mrs. Smith calls you.
Well, so typically I like to sit down and have a conversation with Mrs. Smith. If she's, say, the mum, and we're filing on behalf of the son or the daughter, I sit down and I do kind of a triage, right? It's like going into the emergency room. I want a history. Tell me what's been going on for the last 5-10 years.
Right.
What's, have they been in trouble? What have they been using? How long have they been using it? What caused them to be using it? Was there some kind of underlying cause? I want the history. I want to know everything about this person.
Sure.
And then I'm going to sit down and say, okay, what's going on now? Are they threatening to harm themselves? Are they using now? What are they using now? So I need a complete history. If there are sufficient legal facts present, sufficient to file a Marchman Act, I'm going to draft a petition based on what they tell me. They're going to sign it. It's going to get notarized, so it's under oath. And then I'm going to electronically file it with the clerk of the court. So the Marchman Act is really a two-step process. The first step being assessment, stabilization, and detox, which is basically your 5-day hold. And then there's a second petition, which is for the treatment. Order my son or daughter into treatment for up to 90 days. And that's typically based on what the assessment comes back and says. So the step one is filing that initial petition. That's getting filed on what they call an ex parte basis, meaning if it's legally sufficient, the judge is going to sign an order, a pickup order, and tell the local sheriff, go get that person and take him to a detox facility. The second part of the Marchman Act process.
Now, how does that work, picking up somebody and bringing them to a detox if they don't have the resources for that type of treatment? What happens in that case?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And that is, sort of the 800-pound gorilla in the room. One of the conversations I have to have with a family, and sometimes it's not always a comfortable conversation, is can you afford to send them to treatment, or does your insurance cover it? Because obviously,
right.
If they don't have either one of those things, then sending the person to a county facility can be problematic because they have very limited resources. And so one of the things that I'm going to do when I sit down with a family is arrange that treatment plan so that when I file my petition asking for assessment and stabilization and detox, I'm going to say, Judge, this is what's going on, this is why, this is what I want you to do, and this is where I want you to send them. so that all that's done.
Right.
So obviously, if you are someone who doesn't have insurance or doesn't have the financial ability to pay for treatment, then you then have a court order which is very difficult to enforce because you have nowhere to send the person. It's a problem,
Yeah,
no doubt.
I know we get calls here, and I know we've given a lot of scholarships out to people that have called the Marchman Act
Kudos
website.
to you for doing that.
And they've called, and I personally spoke to people on the phone, and I know we try to help out every person we can. If we have empty beds and no one's in those beds, we'll give you a scholarship. And we get the calls quite often, more than we have beds open, and we feel terrible that we can't help everyone, but we try. We really do.
I think it's great. I tip my hat to you for doing that. It's a difficult situation. I get it.
It is, and I feel for them on the other end of the phone. I know exactly what they're going through.
They are in crisis. We were just talking about it before we came on the show. I lost my dad at the beginning of the year.
Sorry to hear that.
But for 2 years before that, my mum and I were busy either calling 911 or running him to the emergency room. And while my dad was lying there with tubes coming out everywhere, as a family, we were in crisis. That's the exact same emotional state that I see with families who are dealing with addiction.
Absolutely.
The same thing.
Absolutely.
The family's in crisis. They
Right.
really are. They just don't know what to do.
Right. I agree.
Now, interesting that you might go through the steps, and let's say Mrs. Smith and her daughter, and the daughter gets evaluated and is deemed that she is in need of treatment. The judge says yes. What's to stop the daughter from saying, "I just don't want to go"? I mean, is that court order enforceable that she would be absolutely forced, or can she walk away?
The judge is going to say, "Listen, I'm making a finding that you need to go to treatment, and I'm going to give you a choice. You can either go to treatment, or I can hold you in contempt and put you in the county jail. You may have treatment in there, but I know that you won't be using." Well, that's the idea anyway. Although that's a different conversation. But the idea is, it's leveraged treatment, right? I mean, we're going to force the person to go.
Wow. Well, that's amazing. This has been around since 1993. Did you know that?
I had no idea. I'm very familiar with the Baker Act and not the Marchman Act up until, I would say, the last 6 months, where we've had people contact us. I think what needs to change is when somebody's court ordered, the state needs to work with, I think, a handful of treatment centers and try to get them into treatment centers if there's no state facilities to send them to. Because if they don't have an option to send them somewhere and someone doesn't have the resources, I mean, listen, I would put X amount aside to give to the state to send people in here as a scholarship program. And I think if everyone did that has a private center, that would alleviate a big part of the problem that there's no facility to take them.
I agree with you.
And if everyone would band together and say, listen, I'm going to give you 20 beds this year, and you give 20 beds, you give 20 beds. This one, when somebody comes, with the Marchman Act and says, listen, we just don't have the funds. We're barely making it on ourselves, feeding the family, but we need help. I think people need to step up to the plate. I really do.
I agree with you. I wrote an article about this not that long ago, maybe about a month ago, and basically, my argument was that the private sector is not the problem. The private sector is the solution.
Right.
It
is.
We've now got these supposedly access to millions and millions of federal dollars because of the state of emergency the governor declared. And I'm saying to myself, well, what are we going to do? Reopen up the Sheriff's Drug Farm? Are we going to expand to other county facilities? We have all these amazing treatment providers right here in the county throughout the state.
Let's use them.
Not all of them are bad, right? I mean, there are some
Absolutely.
really great. Let's use them. I mean, let's work out. Maybe you got to work out a financial arrangement with those folks to do that. I mean, you're running a business, you should be compensated. I mean, there's a lot of very well-trained, expert people who they have to be paid, right? So I think that we should be using the private sector, not abusing the private sector, and not continually pointing fingers. I get it. There are some bad actors, but that's the same with lawyers and doctors and anything else.
You'll find that everywhere. Absolutely.
We're all licensed professionals.
Very
right?
well said. Very well said. I got to agree. What do you think, Jonesy?
I'm just, I actually had an opportunity to look at your article, and I can't remember the name of the magazine this was in.
Boca's Best.
This Boca's Best.
Best.
Yes, absolutely. About the opioid crisis in South Florida. First, you know what? I have to ask, we talk about gorillas in the room. You have an accent.
Originally from England many years ago.
Okay.
I told you it wasn't Staten Island.
I thought it was.
I told you.
I thought it was Pennsylvania Dutch. I don't know. No, I'm kidding.
Whereabouts in England?
From North London.
Oh, okay. I played with a band from Surrey.
All right, not too far away.
Yeah. Right out of college. I went right there and toured with the band from Surrey.
Well,
Good times.
I'm Welsh, so nobody even talks to me. Okay, so I just wanted to get that out of the way. But you wrote some very interesting things in here, and it really looks like you really, in your turn, I'll quote you as saying, I take a very holistic approach to my work so clients can get treatment, stay out of jail, keep their professional licenses, protect their futures, and rebuild their lives. That's a pretty powerful statement. Do you believe there's a lot of people going to jail who probably would benefit from treatment as opposed to just going to jail?
It's interesting when you look at the folks that are in the criminal system, right? You've sort of got, people at the lower end of the spectrum. Maybe they get a DUI or a small petty type of crime. At one end, there are people who've done something silly and maybe won't ever do it again. And at the other end, you've got your violent offenders, robbers, rapists, murderers. But in the middle, you've got a large chunk of people, probably 85% of the people who are in the system who are there because they've got an addiction issue, and they're there and they keep coming back and back and back and back because they don't have access to treatment, and so it never gets addressed. And finally, some judge just says, "Look, we're done, off to prison," which, interestingly enough, is one of the best places to get drugs. But so my clients tell me anyway. But yes, I mean, you've got these people who really could benefit, and I think when you think that most of those people don't have access to private lawyers, they can't afford it, they don't have access to treatment, they're going to just keep coming back. And so ultimately, something bad happens to them.
I got a question here on Facebook. John wants to know, how would a treatment center use a Marchman Act? So what the treatment center can do is they can, obviously, if they refer further the client's family, the patient's family, to somebody like me, part of this, they can be then court ordered to the treatment center to get assessed, and maybe that treatment center is also the place where the treatment is provided. So, I mean, what's interesting is, a lot of the people who are in Florida come here for treatment, right? I mean, I know that's, a big thing, right? Come to Florida and get well. And we, like I said, we have a lot of great treatment centers down here, but we have a lot of people coming in from out of state. The problem is that if they walk out of treatment, and their family sent them 1,000, 2,000 miles, there's no recourse for that. So, I mean, I think in those circumstances, the good treatment centers are saying, look, if your son, daughter walks out of treatment, there's no recourse. I really think you should have a conversation about doing a Marchman Act, because, they've already walked out of one treatment center. At least if we do a Marchman Act, there's some recourse. We can go and run into court and get some help. And again, I think the Marchman Act has its pitfalls, but it's something. Right, as opposed to do you
nothing.
notice that people that are in treatment on a Marchman Act stay in treatment?
Yes, when the judge tells them they're going to go to jail if you don't stay in.
Okay.
Yeah, they'll take treatment over jail. How's that?
Well, the serious consequences do motivate people.
Absolutely.
Mean, obviously. I have a little confusion, though. The Marchman Act, it's not an immediate thing. Like, I believe a Baker Act, if somebody threatens themselves or someone else, you can make a phone call 911 and you can institute the Baker Act immediately with a sheriff's office or somebody and get them to a treatment or into psychiatric. Can you do the same thing with Marchman, or is it a longer process?
Well, so it's a slightly longer process if you initiate the process with a petition, in other words, going through the court system. But there are the two other provisions of the Marchman Act which nobody seems to be using or even talking about. So there's what they call the protective custody provision, which is just like the Baker Act. You call 911 and law enforcement come and you say, this is my kid. They're high. Right. They have a history. They meet the Marchman Act process. Take them to a detox facility. It can be initiated by law enforcement. It could be initiated by a licensed treatment provider.
Right.
So that 72-hour hold that we talked about for the Baker Act is also in the Marchman Act and doesn't involve the court system. It's there. It's been there for a while. No one seems to be talking about it. No one seems to be using it. But then again, that would go to a county-run program at that point, where the sheriff would pick up the child or loved one and family and take them somewhere, because they're very limited to where they can bring someone. They're going to take them to the nearest detox facility. But look, if you're somebody with private insurance, and you say, look, my insurance covers this hospital, they'll probably take you there.
Yeah.
If it's, so it can be done that way. But obviously, if during that 72 hours, somebody doesn't then go into court and file a petition, then after 72 hours, they're walking out, just like they would with the Baker Act.
Right. So you're right back to square one.
Yeah. So you got, at some point, you got to involve the court system.
I think you do.
You do.
But it's important to know that if there is an immediacy to it, deal with it. Call the police.
Yeah.
Get it going. And then within that 72 hours, make sure you're contact
Because
your lawyer.
look at most
and get it
people
going.
you're
Yeah.
going to pick up and throw into detox. Let's use that term, throw into detox, because that's what it is at that point. They're going to walk right out the door. They'll AMA probably within the first 10, 12 hours.
Some of the emergency rooms are dealing with the same person 2, 3, 4 times in the same night, same 24-hour period. And I'm like, I don't understand. Why don't you can hold them. There's a provision. You can hold them for 72 hours.
Well, I think it's about educating people what this Marchman Act is and what you have at your fingertips to use.
Well, not only that, I mean, does a hospital have the ability, do they have somewhere to put these people, right? For 72 hours. I mean, that's another, issue. But, I mean, it's there in the statute. The authority's there. We're just not using it. And, again, I think it comes down to resources and education. When I've been to the hospitals and talked to folks in the ER, they like, we just don't know where to put them.
Right.
Now, is this a national or is this Florida?
So the Marchman Act is a Florida state statute, but there are, I think, 37 other states out there, or 36 other states out there that have some type of involuntary commitment statute. Sometimes it deals with alcohol, sometimes it deals with drugs, sometimes it deals with mental health. It's all over the place. I mean,
Right.
I think we have a very unique statute here, and I know that that the conversation about having some type of national federal standard for involuntary commitment, that conversation is starting to happen. But I mean, you got 13. If you live in New York, you got nothing. I mean,
Have you approached any politicians regarding the Marchman Act to get on board and support this?
So I think there's a number of politicians talking about it. I think in terms of being in Palm Beach County, we're very lucky. We have a state attorney, Dave Ehrenberg, who's really leading the charge on the whole.
He's doing a great job.
He's doing a
Absolutely.
great job. And having worked in that office many years ago, I'm somewhat of a soft spot for the office. But Dave's doing a bang up job. There's no doubt about it. And he's been leading the charge. And so if he's listening, I hope he's going to call me and say, "Come and help me fix the Marchman Act."
Actually, I did look up. New York State does have an adoption of the Baker Act.
We do? Okay, maybe for mental health.
But that's for mental health only.
Yeah,
again.
right. Yeah.
So
and
how
we see what the big difference is there, Jonesy. We see the Marchman Act and the Baker Act. It's night and day.
So how would somebody find out? Is there like a do you call your state mental health board? Do you call to find out what is available in your state? If somebody is listening, because we do get listeners who are listening in Virginia or somewhere else, and any suggestions for them?
Go online and just maybe do a quick Google search. How do I involuntarily commit my son or daughter in the state of Virginia or wherever it happens to be? I mean, there is some publications out there that do talk about the states that have these involuntary commitment laws.
Boy, but there's a real need for a national organization to really help and put this together into some sort of national program.
No doubt about it.
I mean, people don't generally go to the same state for treatment. Sometimes they do, but a lot of times they're going state to state. We need help. We need to have this all working together.
Well, and not only that, the one thing that's good about the Marchman Act is that once somebody literally their feet touch Florida, you can Marchman Act, and they don't have to be a resident of the state. The problem is if they if they are able to sort of flee the jurisdiction of the court. In other words, they run from Florida and they go to Georgia or somewhere else. That pickup order is not going to get enforced. I mean,
right.
Which to me is it's ridiculous, right? I mean, if a judge here in Florida issues an arrest warrant and you get picked up in another state, especially if it's for a serious felony, they're going to ship you back here.
Right.
They're going that other state is going to execute on the Florida warrant because it's in a national database, the NCIC, which is a national database of things like warrants, right? But when it comes to something civil like a Marchman Act, I mean, no other state's going to do anything with a Broward County or a Palm Beach County pickup order. They're just not going to do anything with it, and I'm not even sure if it's enforceable.
Wow. Yeah. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to be right back with Mark Astor. Stand by and get your questions ready. We'll get to them. Thanks.
Welcome to Treatment Partners of America, your partner in recovery. Treatment Partners of America is a unique, state-of-the-art substance abuse facility. Our trained professionals first focus on finding the core issues in trauma that lead to addiction. With some of the best doctors, nurses, and behavioral health techs the industry has to offer. we offer personalized one-on-one therapy 5 days a week, raising the bar to a higher level of standards. Whether it's drugs, alcohol, eating disorders, gambling, sex and love addiction, or even relationship addiction, Treatment Partners of Merck as specialists to treat and to help heal your addiction long-term rather than attempt a temporary 30-day quick fix.
Welcome back to SoberSmash Live. We're here with our special guest today, attorney Mark Astor. He's right here from Boca Raton, Florida, talking about different things to help people with addiction, Baker Act, Marchman Act. We got a lot we're covering here, Scott.
Yeah, I was just saying to Mark during the break that, Mark is actually changing the way people look at treatment because there are resources out there and help. And I think it's all about educating. I hate to use the word consumer because you are a consumer learning about what to do at that point.
Yeah.
You have a loved one, a neighbor or a family member, someone you work with that really needs help and you don't know what to do. There are things you can do. Mark's doing the right thing, and we're going to put up, his contact information on our site, his phone number, how to contact him, his email. If you have a problem and don't know what to do, he's the guy you need to contact with this. There are ways to get help, and let somebody help you that knows what they're doing. Years ago, everyone used to think, hey, I have somebody in my family's using drugs. I'm going to Baker Act them, put them in a mental institution. There's a problem with the person. It's a disease. Let's fix it, get them help, and let them start their life on the right path. And that's what we're here to do. So I think Mark can really help you with something like this and steer you in the right direction. There are resources.
Absolutely. Listen, in 2016, 592 overdose deaths in Palm Beach County alone for opiates. And I know that's right where you're operating, Mark. Is that
That's
one of the
way too
numbers
many.
that got you?
Way too many.
Yeah, and I think we've already exceeded that for 2017.
I think so too.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's only
and
getting worse.
the drugs are getting stronger and stronger. What you see that's out there, it's a one-time use and you're gone. It's not like you're trying a drug and you like it and you keep using it. It's a one-time shot. It's killing you. You're touching it and it's killing you.
Yep. I've got a brother who's doing his, as a doctor, doing his residency at a hospital in Miami, and he tells me that the worst part of his residency was being in the ER, and you'd have an 18, 19-year-old kid come in who'd overdosed on the street, and by the time the paramedics got there, it was too late because this stuff that's now laced with
fentanyl.
With fentanyl,
it's terrible.
Kid goes and has has a heart attack, cardiac arrest on the spot, and by the time you get there, the brain dead. Nothing you can do.
Yeah,
it's over.
Yeah. It's not Woodstock anymore, folks.
No.
It's a dangerous, dangerous place out there. Now, you're working so closely with the courts and everything. Can the courts, without the cooperation of the family, do anything with the Marchman Act?
So the Marchman Act is a civil process, so it's not involving the state. So in terms of involving the state, if someone's been arrested, in other words, they're in the criminal system,
right?
Then it's a different type of process. But if they're not, if there's someone who hasn't been in too much trouble, and so there aren't sort of mandatory, prison being sought, then getting a treatment plan in place is a great thing. I mean, I have a client now who's already been to the state penitentiary once, and has been battling this disease for 20 years. And he's a really bright young man, but there's an underlying mental health issue going on there, and he's been abusing his medications for a long time, and it's really never been addressed. And he's we're in the process of working with the courts to try and save him. And obviously, if he can stay in treatment, then he's probably going to be saved. But so there's two ways to get in treatment, right? One is you hope that you don't end up in the criminal system, because then there's that risk you end up in prison and a felony conviction and everything else that goes with it. And then you have the Marchman Act process, which is civil in nature. But sometimes people don't get that help, and they start to get arrested, and they start to get into the system. And at some point, some judge is going to say, look, sorry, we're done.
Now, when somebody's Marchman Act, does that go on their record, let's say? Does it show that they were Marchman Act?
It's a confidential process.
It is.
Yeah.
So if someone's going for a job in the future, their employer's not going to look up and say, hey, I noticed Jane Doe was Marchman Act in 2017. I'm not going to hire her.
Right? They're not going to be able to see it. In fact,
That's great.
As far as the pleading is concerned, unless you're sort of counsel of record, you're not going to have access to the records. And even I, as the petitioner's lawyer, I don't get access to all the records. I mean,
So everything's sealed.
yeah. Well, you got to remember that we're still dealing with medical records, and so unless there's some
It's
type of
a
release,
HIPAA law. Sure.
you got HIPAA. Now, one of the other things that I do is, I'm a big believer in filing emergency, guardianships. That's another aspect of dealing with this that I've just started doing. Is getting control of the medical decisions. I work with another lawyer who does that, and she's absolutely fabulous.
And tell us a little about that.
So basically, you are allowed to go into court, and I think it's called what they call an ETG, an emergency temporary guardianship. Basically, very similar allegations to what's in the Marchman Act. Saying to the judge, look, if you don't allow me to make medical decisions for them, make me so I have control of these things. They
So it's almost like a power of attorney.
Yeah, something similar to that, right? I need to be able to make decisions. They're going to hurt themselves. They may be stealing because, drug addicts like to lie, cheat, and steal. So, they're depleting their assets. They're a threat to themselves physically or somebody else. So that's one of the things that I now do because, if you need to be able to make those decisions for them. So, I mean, that's one of the things I'm doing now, and I give my clients options. I say, look, we can do this and we can do that. And I think that the Marchman Act and the guardianship, should be going together. And, one of the things I just sort of wrote about was why isn't the same judge hearing the same petition, right? Same facts, same witnesses.
Right.
Why do it twice? The only thing is obviously with the emergency guardianship is it can become adversarial. They are allowed to fight this, they're allowed to fight the guardianship. And the second part of the Marchman Act can become adversarial, meaning when you start to ask the court to force them into treatment, they can fight. So, I mean, it can get adversarial, and they're entitled to counsel, court-appointed counsel if they can't afford one. But, we can do something, right? I mean, the Marchman Act's not perfect, but we got a system. We're not using it properly.
I see this as Scott. We hear it all the time. Is people are like, well, I can't do anything to help them. My son, my daughter, my brother, my sister, I can't do anything to help them. I'm powerless to help them. And what you're telling us is, no, you are not powerless. You have an opportunity. Now, you can't force somebody to recover. You can't force somebody to want change. But you can push them into that opportunity, at least give them the chance.
Well, I think what Mark's saying, Scott, is that you have two choices here. Either go get help or you're going to jail.
Right.
We're going to put you, contempt of court. Who wants to be in that situation? Go to 30, 60 days of treatment. It's going to help you. Or go sit in a jail cell.
Right.
What option are you going to take?
Right. And the point
I would think most of the people are going to go get help.
We're not powerless anymore.
We're not powerless. And my experience is that once someone's even, over 5-7 days, they've had some type of detox, they tend to think a little bit more rationally after that, right? They're thinking a little bit clearer.
Sure.
And so the idea of going to treatment suddenly seems a whole lot more appealing than going to the county jail.
Right.
Which
And after about 20, 21 days, they're like, I can't believe I was doing that. What was I thinking at that time? Because like you said, the cloudiness is starting to go away. They're starting to see that beautiful picture that's in front of them, and they're realizing they have a life. Because 3 weeks ago, I wanted to die. I really didn't give a shit. Today, it's different. I'm seeing what's out there, and there's people that care about me. I didn't even know that.
Wow.
Yeah, it's when you look, perhaps better than I do, but when you see that transformation, it's really quite awe-inspiring, right? I mean, you're like, wow.
That's the reason we do what we do every day.
Absolutely.
How rewarding is that?
That's the reason we do what we do.
Yeah, that's the reason I do what I do, because it's extremely rewarding.
It sure is.
Well, you've done a lot. I mean, you've been with the attorney, you've been a prosecutor, you've been defense. This is the most rewarding thing you've done?
This is certainly the most rewarding thing I've done since I was a prosecutor, right? Because at the end of the day, you're trying to help people get a little, get some justice for them, give them some closure, and give them an answer, right? As lawyers, we're so fixated, and maybe it's just our training. We're so fixated on the fact we are legal problem solvers. Let me tell you something, and if there's any lawyers listening to this, they should listen to this. When a client comes to you, it's not a legal problem; it's a personal problem. It's why they don't sleep at night. It's why mom and dad are fighting. It's why mom can't focus at work. Okay, that's why everything around them is a mess because their son, their daughter is dealing with addiction. It's a personal problem. Okay, you have to deal with the family. You have to help these folks. I mean, if mom and dad are having issues, get them a therapist, right? So you have to deal with it from that perspective. I mean, and sometimes for the parents, the hardest decision for them to make is to say, okay, I'm going to force my kid into treatment. It's a very difficult decision for them to make, and sometimes they sit with me 2-3 times and they're like, okay, we get it, we just have to bite the bullet and just do it, because they're not going to do it themselves. But it is very much a personal problem, and
especially a parent that's out there saying, you know what, I'm not going to enable my child any longer.
Right.
You're on your own. I'm cutting you off. Leave the house. I don't care what happens at this point. I'm done with you. This is an option. No parent wants to say, I'm finished with you. Go on your own. No one wants to make that choice. You'll do anything for your child, but you're doing a wrong thing when you're enabling them, giving them money for drugs. This is an option every parent has.
Absolutely.
They do.
And for every parent out there that's concerned about getting, trying to force too much, or trying to get too involved, for everyone out there thinking that, I guarantee there's at least one other person saying, I wish I did, or I wish I knew about this. So, people, you have to listen up, learn about the Marchman Act, learn about the things that you can do to protect your loved ones, to help them. Give them the opportunity, just give them the opportunity. But I applaud all the things you're doing, Mark.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mark.
I think it's incredible.
Good deal what you're doing.
Thank you.
So what would you tell the family out there the first thing they should do if there's a problem and they need help like this? What should they do?
So, I don't charge to consult with families. I give them options, right? And if I think that, that is potentially, right for a Marchman Act, I'll tell them. If I don't think it is, or if they're not comfortable with that, I'll say, listen, I work with a lot of great treatment centers. Here's a referral to one. Call these folks, right? I'm happy to send clients and patients to treatment centers that really, really care about their clients. I'll do that all day long, and that's,
Sure.
That's what I'm here to do, is to help people. And if it's right for a Marchman Act, I'm going to tell them, yeah, you need to Marchman Act, and maybe you need a guardianship too. So I give them options, and I give them access to a lot of free resources. So, if they engage me, they engage me. If they don't, and we save somebody, that's a beautiful thing, right?
Absolutely. You save one life, it's great. That's the way we look at it.
So let's just, the way things are going, what would you like to see? Let's say we're sitting here 5 years from now. What changes would you like to see 5 years from now, other than obviously helping a lot more people? But what changes do you think are necessary for us to keep moving forward?
Well, so, obviously, I think the underlying, the big issue is everybody has to have access to treatment, right? They got to have access to first-class treatment, world-class treatment. This is America, so we got to have that. And, if they need, and maybe we need more lawyers doing this stuff. So, so that we can help more people, right? So, we got to get people into treatment, and education's great, but when someone's addicted, they're addicted. You got to get them help. Number one.
You can't have people wandering the streets anymore, looking, to sleep under a bridge and just doing drugs, and people want help, and I believe that. I don't think people that are out there homeless doing drugs want to be in that situation. They don't.
I don't think they do. Look, I hate to say it, but we are our brother and sister's keeper. If you see somebody with a problem, ask them, can I help you?
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, Mark, you've been a great guest. You really educated, I know, myself, and I'm sure Jonesy feels the same way.
Absolutely.
You taught us a lot, and I think everyone listening out there, please look what Mark's doing. Get some information. He can help you or a loved one. Don't be afraid to call. Please.
Thank you for having me on
Great,
the show.
buddy. You've been sober.
Sober Smash.